Hey everyone, my name is Bogdan and welcome to Accurate Addicted channel, helping you to navigate in the world of automotive repairs, maintenance and reviews. Today I'll be replacing front brakes on a 2010 Ford Fusion Hybrid. There's a bit of a grinding noise on the left side when braking and the brakes are not very sharp. So let's find out what happened here. Here's the list of tools you need to complete this job. A new set of rotors and pads. 10, 14, 15 and 19 mm sockets with a 1/2 inch ratchet and a breaker bar. A T30 bit. A flathead screwdriver, or better yet, a Prybar. A bungee cord to secure your caliper. A brake piston compressing tool. Torque wrench if you want to properly torque your fasteners. A rubber mallet to make it easier to remove stuck rotors and pads. Wire brush. Brake cleaner. Paper towels. Silicone grease for caliper pins. Copper grease for brake pads. A syringe or a small tool for sucking some of the brake fluid from the reservoir to avoid overflowing it when compressing the pistons. Decent work light. It's also helpful, although not necessary, to help the following. An impact wrench to speed up the process. Penetrating oil in case any of the fasteners are stuck. Threadlocker for some fasteners. A magnetic tray for certain nuts and bolts. Links to everything I use are in the description. Let's roll! Engage the parking brake. Loosen the lug nuts. Boy, these don't look like they were tight at all, especially this one. Lock the rear wheels, jack up the car and secure it. I use an extra scissor jack to secure it here. Remove the wheel. It's a good idea to inspect your suspension components while you're there, by the way. I do it every time I work on brakes, but I'll leave that for another video. Okay, so what are we observing here? The brakes visually are in more or less decent shape, minus the outside lip on the rotor. I would say the pads are only halfway through. Not bad for 125,000 miles. But then again, I don't know if these are original brakes, although it's believable since it's a hybrid. Let's remove the caliper first. The brake line looks pretty tight, so we'd better loosen it by removing this 10 mm bolt on this bracket. Remove the lower slider pin bolt. It's 14 mm. Let's pry the caliper off the brake pads. It's going really hard, which is the first indicator that something might be wrong. Okay, there it is. Here's the old rusted hardware. I was actually surprised to see how many different hardware elements are here. We have 2 retention springs. I can only see the upper one, so I have no idea where the other one went. Brake pad backplates are toast. There are also not less than 6 other metal shims here. That's a great example of over-engineering for no apparent reason. Okay, removing the caliper. I'm using a bungee cord to hold the caliper in place so there's no tension on the brake line. You don't want that. I can't move the pads even with a Prybar easily. Another not so good of a sign. Let's get on with removing the pads. They're completely stuck. You have to be careful as you don't want your caliper to crack if you apply excessive force. I'm going to use the Prybar and try to hammer the other pad out. Obviously, I'm only doing this because we are replacing both the pads and rotors. I wouldn't do that if, let's say, I was just servicing the brakes. The second one doesn't budge. I'll see if it's easier when I remove the bracket. In order to remove the bracket, you need a 15 mm socket. I'm going to use a breaker bar and finish it with an impact. My impact is not high torque, so sometimes a good old breaker bar is really helpful. Okay, removing the remnants of the old hardware and hammering out the brake pad. They're really not supposed to be stuck like that. Imagine the stress the brake piston has to go through to get this to move through the caliper grooves. Cleaning up the bracket with a wire brush, just getting the loose rust off. Good, there are two T30 bolts holding the rotor on the hub. Using an impact is preferable here. Now let's remove the rotor. Easier said than done. Even after giving it a good whack with a rubber mallet, it looks like there's a rust lip that's formed on the inside of the rotor cap, which prevents it to slide off the hub. Took me at least 15 minutes to get it off. Finally, let's clean the hub, removing the loose rust. Now douse it with brake cleaner and wipe it off. I like to use copper paste to lubricate the hub to prevent the new rotor sticking. Make sure the paste is distributed more or less evenly around the hub center. Just don't get any on your studs. If you accidentally get any there, wipe it off. Here's the new rotor. Looks good. Use the brake cleaner to remove the anti-rust film off of it. Both sides. Getting the new rotor on. Make sure that T30 bolt holes are aligned so you could get the bolts back in. I'm also applying medium Threadlocker to them, which should prevent both seizing and loosening, although it's not that important with these, since they are not compulsory because the rotor is tightened by lug nuts, but it makes it easier nonetheless. Now, because of how tight the brake pads were in the caliper, I decided to put the pads into the bracket along with the hardware first. All of the hardware comes with the brake rotors and pads kit, which is great. They even included a pair of rubber gloves. When I was doing the other side, I found that the shims are not exactly the same as the ones that were on the car. I also found they do not sit as tight. So I'll bend them a little bit with pliers to make sure they're a tight fit. Now let's put this Lego, no less, together. These shims can be used both on upper and lower side. Notice the direction I'm putting them in and how they are secured here. And these are different for the inner and outer side. I always put a little copper paste on the pads at the points where they touch the calipers. Nothing excessive, just a thin film. And installing the pads into the bracket. Looks like the new pads are also an extremely tight fit. Must be the design. The inner pad must have the wear indicator on it on the top when installed. Okay, now let's reinstall the bracket with the pads onto the knuckle and secure it with bolts. I don't have the torque specs, so just make them real snug. Time to lubricate the slider pins. Remove the pin, wipe it off, check it for damages, and lubricate it with a silicone paste. These have rubber parts, so using anything metallic might get them to swell and be stuck in the caliper. Looks like it's moving freely, which is the goal here. Let's do the lower one now. It's completely seized and not moving. I think we found the culprit. You need to be really careful with it, as you don't want it to break while it's in the bracket, because then you'll have yourself a totally different level of trouble and possibly will need a new bracket. So I just went relatively gentle to make sure it's moving a little bit and use back and forth motion to avoid twisting and breaking. Just be patient. Once it's moving relatively free, you can try and hammer it out. Again, gently. Yeah, it's really rusted. Even our inner brake pad broke loose, so I had to reinstall it again. I lightly tapped the pin to get any loose rust off of it. Yes, there's definitely something wrong with it. The rubber part is squeezed, which is what I believe is a partial cause of seizing. I'm going to recommend the owner to replace the lower pin. Let's clean it, lubricate it, and see how it works. It's moving. Not perfect, but much better than not moving at all. Don't forget to get the boot on fully to ensure the dust and debris are not getting in. Using pliers to get it over the bracket lip. Now put the retainer springs here, although it's not clear to me as to the effect these have, considering I can't move the brake pads even with my hands. Time to compress that piston in order to fit the caliper over the new pads and rotors. I'm using the old brake pad to level the tool against the piston. Also, you're almost guaranteed to have an overflow in the brake fluid reservoir, so make sure you open it and have someone watch the level, or watch it yourself, as you're compressing the pistons back into the caliper. In this case, I had to suck some of the fluid out as it was overfilling. Now that the piston is all the way back, let's remove the bungee cord and reinstall the caliper. Secure the upper pin bolt and lower pin bolt, and 10mm bolt on this bracket. Put the wheel back on, tighten the lug nuts, lower the jack, and torque those lug nuts to 135 Nm or 100 pound-feet. Don't forget to check the brake fluid level, close the cap, and pump the brakes a couple of times before you take it on a test drive. That's it. Clearly, this was quite a stubborn case. Hopefully, your experience will be better. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit that bell button for more videos on this channel. And as always, drive safe, use your turn signals, and remember, anything is possible with the right tools and motivation. See you next time!